And you guys are all set, Rig. I'm making you host right now.
Okay, great.
Alrighty, so I will, I'll call it to order for the, Finance Subcommittee's, Subcommittee on, Capital Expenditure Policy, 7:17 p.m. on Tuesday, June 20th. For first of the disclosure is calling to order pursuant to Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Act of 2020, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, and the March 31, 2025 extension granted by Chapter 22 of the Act of 2022. This meeting is for the town of Bridgewater, will be fully remote and accessible to the public through remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance is permitted. Citizens who wish to tune into the meeting may do so via Zoom with the information on the agenda listed. So first and foremost, after call to order, I'm going to see if there's anybody that has any public comments. Since I am calling in via a cell phone connection, Rig, do you see anybody that needs to be able to submit public comment?
Nope, none at all, MJ.
Alrighty, hearing no comment, let's get to letter C on our agenda, new business. Our only item of discussion tonight is discussion to receive public records request materials from Bridgewater Rainham School District. Now, a bit of disclosure on this. We are still waiting on information from the town of Bridgewater as it relates to their capital expenditure policies. But in the interim, we received documentation from the Bridgewater Rainham School District as part of my public records request. It kind of took a few days, but they followed through. And upon receipt, I had the materials distributed to the committee, myself, Mr. Knoll, and Mr. Langone, to read and to get a bit of a sense of what the school district does with their capital expenditure policies, and to see if they have cogent enough policy decisions and measures that we could possibly adapt into a greater policy once we get the data from the town itself to work on an amended version or revised version of the proposed order that was before us probably now roughly 6 to 8 weeks ago. So without further ado, let's start a bit of discussion, and I will open it up to Rig. So Rig, if you want to share your input on the items that we had, you may do so.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking, so I went through the document, and I'm going to be honest with you. The document was pretty overwhelming for me because, you know, obviously, you know, I'm new to, you know, the government, but you know, I think that I started to think about, you know, it'll be interesting to see when we do get Bridgewater's information to see how similar, if there's consistent language, and if there's not consistent language, number one, that, you know, that would bring, you know, there would be questions around that, given that we're Bridgewater Rainham.
Right.
And then number two, right? How do we get consistent language across the board for the appropriate organizations? So it's not just the school department, but, you know, we should be looking at other public entities as well, so that we create, you know, a consistent language that embodies, you know, same information across the board that would allow, you know, the different public departments, you know, to operate under that same language, particularly when it comes down to making financial requests and budgeting. And of course, you know, the purpose of this conversation, this extended conversation in this subcommittee, is to look at such so that, you know, monies that are being asked, you know, requested to do certain projects or for whatever means, and if those funds are approved, that those funds are, there's going to be a process for which, you know, those funds are either going to be used for those projects, And if they're not going to be used for those projects, that those funds cannot arbitrarily be used, for any other means, other than the project for which those funds were approved for. So those are the immediate thoughts that I have. I think it's still, it would be interesting to see once we get the information from Bridgewater, to see what it looks like. And let me stop there, MJ, and have you just jump in and, give me your thoughts and your perspective on the information that you got.
Yeah, so when I got the information, I was hoping for something a little more precise. When the school district gave me the answer to the request that I had, and my request was fairly specific. I think we had it entered into the record, so I'm going to try while I'm talking to get that on screen, because it kind of informs how I wanted to see the information, or how I hoped to see the information. My hope was that we were going to see a manual stating for, say for athletic field purposes, certain amount above this is what we're looking for, for track resurfacing, or we set a goal to request every 2 or 3 years funds from the town for turf rebuilding, or adding in new grass, or removing sod from one of the sports fields. I was expecting something like that.
Right.
And instead, the materials that we got back from Bridgewater Rainham, sort of the impression left me feeling a bit lacking on that, because the manual they actually gave us the general information about the Office of Inspector General's policies about procurement, and that's sort of without any sense of why they were giving me this. I don't see how this helps us in this matter. Like, the document itself gives us information about how to do contracts, and that wasn't specifically what I was asking for.
Right.
And then the almost what I would say is more of a fiscal management manual. They gave me a 30-page document that talks about everything else except a specific policy.
Right.
It gives me generalizations as to what fiscal management means in the respect of, well, it's a school district, it's operating under Chapter 57 of the general laws and various other chapters as it relates to auditing trails and whatnot. But it doesn't really give me a general idea of this is what our policy entails to do when it comes to asking for funds from the school district. It just tells us, that the school district is going to use funds it has, and it will budget them in a manner that is, in tying with fiscal management goals and good accounting practices. It doesn't really speak to a policy of, well, the school committee will only put this before the town of Bridgewater and the town of Rainham if certain thresholds are met.
Right.
Keeping in mind the order that was put before us, it basically was giving us a direction as to the town will only do A, B, and C with funds, but not before C and D are fulfilled by the school district.
Right.
This 30-page document, and I read it twice, and I did everything I could to make sure that I'm reading it right. But reading through it just tells me the authority the school district has under Chapter 71 in some respects, Chapter 44 for applications and whatnot, and then elementary and secondary education with certain CMRs. It's vague in the response that I would have liked to have seen, and it doesn't really fill me with a sense of they understood what my request was. But right. I do have what I requested, and I think I can get it on screen here. Yeah, Town of Bridgewater Finance Record Request. And I did give this to Josh, so it is part of our record. Pardon me. So when I asked the school district, I asked for these several points. One, existing capital expenditure policy, whether in part or in whole, that governs the district or its individual internal subunits, i.e. individual curriculum departments, maintenance, business office, superintendent's office, athletic department, etc. Two, policies which may relate to an existing capital expenditure policy or policies which are utilized by the district to conduct long-term planning, acquisition of capital assets, or capital improvements. And then three, any ancillary policy or policies which may relate to or reference the district's policies on capital expenditures which may or shall govern the district's ability to request funding for capital expenditures from the district's host communities of Bridgewater and Rainham, either in full of both towns or separately of each municipality, depending on the capital need, i.e. for Williams Middle School in Bridgewater or La Liberty Elementary in Rainham. And their response does not really feel like it answers those three particular queries in my eyes, because just by the language that I used, that was pretty targeted and pretty specific. And what Bridgewater Rainham gave us feels very general and broad. It doesn't really drill down to what we're really looking for. So, barring any information we get from the town of Bridgewater, such as like their 5-year capital plan or what they hope to achieve in the next 3 or 4 years as it relates to capital expenditures itself, where they see it happening or see where the funds are going to go. Excuse me. Barring any of the stuff from the town, the reply to my our request as a committee, but through my words as our chair, it doesn't really feel like it answers our questions, and if anything, leaves us to need to maybe perhaps have somebody from the district come in and talk to us, which I don't know if is even possible for a subcommittee as our own, but it is something that we would need to talk to probably the town manager on to see if that's something that we could work with, or if we should just ask Josh to go ahead and invite somebody from the district, or figure out who from the district we could talk to, because what we have does not answer the questions that we asked. And it disappoints me because the school district is usually very good in most regards in getting an answer to the town. And the thing that bothers me the most, full disclosure, as a public servant myself, I'm all for giving the exact answer and the exact information that a person needs. I mean, when someone asks me for, the history of a property's taxes over, say, a decade, it behooves me to tell them with a little bit of background, this is the account summary for this account. It goes back to 2014 and all taxes are on time. That's fairly simple. But in this regard, this request was simple, but it was specific. And I'm not seeing the specificity that we were looking for. And the documentation they gave us left us with more questions than answers, to be honest.
Right. And I have to agree with you. I started off with my comments that it was overwhelming. Part of it because I don't think it really answered. I don't think it answered. Not really. I don't think it answered the request. I think the request is pretty straightforward, right?
Yep.
So which led me to the conclusion that either there isn't such policy, and which warrants the reason why there needs to be a policy, or to your point, could we invite someone so that they can hear the request and why we're asking for this information, and we can give them context to the why. So the why, context to the why, and hopefully they can go back to the drawing board and they can either tell us that there isn't such policy that exists, or there is something that exists that answers the why, the specific why, and that they will then go back and meet our request, and we'll just have to wait a little bit longer. Honestly, I'm almost leaning on the fact that there really isn't, there probably more likely not a policy that exists. The fact that they sent all this legal, information That's really high level, right? That's looking at it the high level legality perspective, but it doesn't really get down in the weeds of, yes, you can ask for, here's how you go about asking, here's how you go about doing A, B, and C, but getting in the weeds of, what happens if those funds are not used once you ask and it's been approved for A, B, and C. That's
exactly. They're
to
giving
know what happens.
Yes, they're giving us the 50,000 foot view, and we were asking for the 20 foot high view, which is
Right.
just basically the ground level for where we're all standing. We don't need the up in the roof rafters types explanations, because
Right.
we already know they have to follow we already know they have to follow the laws regarding tax exemption status, how the school board actually builds their budget, and tells the superintendent that it's his job to manage all the expenses. I mean, we already know that by I wouldn't necessarily say financial fiat or political fiat, but
Right.
it's something that's already general knowledge. People already know they have to follow that. So getting this information seems like they're just more or less repeating the overall, I guess you could say, mission statement, but not necessarily what goes into the mission statement or arises from the mission statement. It begs to be explored further with someone from the school district who either is in the business office, or it begs us to talk to the superintendent. And I'm not sure if we have that capability to do so, but I'm more than happy to explore it for us.
Right. I think it's going to be a challenge, and given that there is a superintendent search, and it's my understanding that there's a search. It's my understanding that there are petitions out there that is asking for a more general search, opposed to, just appointing someone. I think we have a temporary superintendent, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's what I believe I read.
It was my understanding that they had appointed a new superintendent already. I didn't know if they might be interim or not, but it's still something. I mean, a superintendent's going to know, even if they were say assistant superintendent and then booked up to regular superintendent, I would think that they would know the exact same types of policies and procedures that their predecessor or their interim colleague would know.
Right.
So
right.
I feel like we probably need to ask someone from the district to come in and talk to us, because absent an actual document based upon the request that I had, it was straightforward. It was fairly, I'm pretty certain, if I had asked Michael Dutton a question about the capital expenditure policy, I would have gotten an answer out of him.
Right.
Me asking a question to the school district, I didn't get really an answer out of them. I just got general issues.
Right.
So barring that, I'm hesitant to move further on our conversation until such time as we can get somebody from the school district to come in, because it really doesn't feel like we got the fullness of what we need from our request. And I want to see that happen, because barring anything else happening, I anticipate the town of Bridgewater is going to have specific policies and procedures, and we'll have a policy that works great for the town, but we won't really have something that is compatible with the district, because right now, just on this alone, it doesn't tell me they really have a policy.
Right.
I don't want to be creating a wheel for a car that already has 4 tires.
Right. Correct.
So that said, I mean, I think right now our only direction now is, I'm going to make note of it and send it off to Josh. We need someone from the school district, and we need to know who would probably be the best person to talk to.
Right.
And then have them call in for the next meeting, and then perhaps maybe share with them the request that I had sent, and maybe they can further elucidate what we got as a response, or they can walk us through this, because I've read 30 pages twice and it still doesn't read to me like an actual policy to say, oh, we're going to allocate this, but then if we allocate it, we have to contact the towns so that they can take a 2/3 vote or something like that. So I think our discussion, unfortunately, has reached a conclusion for the evening, but it has given us some action items, and I will be sending those to Josh.
Awesome. Thank you. I like the plan of action. Hopefully, knock on fingers or knock on wood, cross my fingers. You know, that we'll be able to get somebody from the district to come and speak to us, so that we can let them know exactly, you know, what we're looking for, and they'll have a better understanding and see if that exists.
Yeah, and knowing that the school year is fast approaching to the end, I'd like to think that most of the non-educator staff of the district will be more than relatively available to perhaps sit down and meet with us at that time. So that said, Rig, I will move us to the next order of business on our agenda, which would be adjournment of the meeting.
I second that.
I seconded. I definitely throw the motion out there, and you seconded it. So with a count of 2 unanimous, I'd say we are concluded, and I will send the information we need over to Josh.
All right, thank you so much, MJ. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you, Reagan. We'll talk soon for everybody.
All right, take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.